Welcome to the Get Trauma Informed podcast, dedicated to unraveling the complexities of trauma, its pervasive impact, and the journey towards holistic recovery and realignment. If your radiance has ever felt muted, like I and thousands of others, you're in the right place to reignite your inner light. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast. Well, hi, and welcome to a very, very, very special episode of the Get Trauma Informed podcast. Y'all, I know I say it a lot. I say it's a special, special episode, but I tell you, when you hear from Dr. Lance, I'm telling you, you are going to go back and listen to this episode over and over again. So I warn you, grab your pen and your paper, get rid of your distractions, because I'm telling you, he's going to knock your socks off like he did mine. How are you, Dr. Lance?
I'm doing excellent today. How are you doing?
I am so super excited that you are here with me today. This is a time that I absolutely have a chance to have an amazing conversation, learn, and just, I can't wait for the conversation. That's where I am today.
I'm always excited to talk to you. We always have good conversations. So let's get into it.
Yes. You all, we had a podcast before the podcast.
Yes, we were already talking. Like we should have been recording that one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we always kick off. Dr. Lance, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and all the fantastic accomplishments that you've been able to make?
Okay. Well, my name is Lance Wells. I'm a board certified emergency medicine and internal medicine physician. I was born and raised in Detroit, product of DPS, Cass Tech, woohoo, in-house technicians. I went to Michigan State for undergrad, got my bachelor's degree in chemistry. And I worked as a chemist for an oil company for a while, kind of bounced around a bunch of different temporary chemical jobs. And I went back to medical school. I went to Wayne State School of Medicine, graduated in 2010. From there, I went on to do a combined residency at Allegheny General in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I pursued emergency medicine and internal medicine. This is a 5-year program. And it's pretty special because it's not a lot of combined programs. It's not a lot of emergency medicine and double boarded internal medicine physicians in the country. It's a specialty that's actually going down as well because a lot of people are not funding that particular program. So I'm kind of special in that regard that I got 2 different board certifications from one residency. And I've been practicing medicine, emergency medicine, internal medicine ever since. I've been in every aspect of medicine throughout my career. I did a lot of surgical time as a student because I was pursuing surgery, and I've done a lot of ICU time, critical care. I've done street medicine. I've done house calls. I've done aerial medicine, which is helicopter medicine. I've done a lot of time in EMS. I'm currently the medical director of the Hillsdale County Medical Command Authority, which is the guidance for EMS for that county. I've done a lot of work in disaster preparation. I've worked with FEMA in a couple of different places. The Center for Domestic Preparedness. I've had a lot of training. So I've been on disaster programs for different hospitals and the community. So I kind of got a varied experience, and I've done a lot in medicine. I like to say every aspect of medicine I've had a touch into where I've trained in it or something.
That is amazing. So you all, now you see why. Well, you'll see at the end of the podcast why I'm so excited that Dr. Lance has decided to join us today. One of the questions that we get started with is, what does Get Trauma Informed mean to you?
Okay. What does Get Trauma Informed mean to me? And we've had this conversation before, like that language, trauma informed, is fairly new to me, but it is starting to become more and more prevalent in the world. Trauma informed to me, from a standpoint of what I do as a physician, sounds a lot like what I'm used to hearing, is that compassionate care, right? And what that basically is trauma informed care is recognizing that the people that you're interacting with have gone through traumas or have gone through events in their life that shape how they think and, more importantly, their behavior. And so you have to be informed, because in order to help somebody who's coming to you for help, you have to be aware of and understand what they've gone through. Um, this is one of my thoughts as a physician, at least the way I practice medicine, is that, I need to kind of know what's going on with you from a holistic standpoint, because any of the plans that I suggest for you for your care, they have to mesh with what your values are, what your experiences are, what your capabilities are. Um, and that's how trauma informed comes into my mind, because trauma informed is really about listening and understanding someone, trying to get to the core of what they are and what they've been through so that you can try to help them. And then the other piece of that is of being an active listener. You have to be an active person creating the space to be safe. You have to create the space for them to want to explain things to you or actually share with you. In medicine, we call that building a rapport with patients or even staff, not just patients, but staff and colleagues you work with. You want your team, as a physician, I'll kind of lead my team in the ER. But if I'm in the middle of a code blue, and we're doing CPR, and I might not be seeing something, I need my nurses to feel comfortable and confident to speak up about what they see. I don't want them to thinking like, well, Dr. Wells, if I say this, he gonna get mad and yell at me. That's creating more trauma for them. That's not just the patient, but that's my staff as well. So being trauma informed means that you are respecting other people's boundaries and other people's experience and other people's voice, as well as still being able to convey your own message.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely incredible about the safe space, right?
Yeah.
Providing that, because when you've gone through trauma, that's something that you don't have is the feeling of being safe, or that anybody else actually understands what you're walking through, right?
Right.
And how
Right.
you're showing up, right? Oftentimes, as a person that have suffered trauma and have gone through trauma recovery, that I cherish that. I
Yeah.
cherish people that understand that, when you haven't had a space of safety, them understanding where you're coming from, no matter how you look, no matter how made up you are when you present, inside you can still be shattered. So that's what this trauma awareness movement is all about. We've had so many interesting conversations. And one of the things that we talked about was we just talked about fear. Can you go into a little bit about when we talk about what does it mean when you said coded or shaded by fear, like our decisions, our emotions? Because that right there, that struck me. And I
Okay.
was like, this is so good. I got to share it.
Okay. Well, to piggyback off of what you just said, I look at it like this. So like you said, we all present ourselves, we all present our character when we come to the world, right? But there are all type of dynamics going on inside of us, and you never know what somebody went through to get before they got to you, what they just went through. And oftentimes the reason becoming trauma informed is important is because we all experience it. We all go through it. And we all have varying levels of tolerance and resilience in respect to the traumas that we've gone through. One thing that might traumatize me might not traumatize somebody else. And so what happens is, unfortunately, is that to be trauma informed, you have to be conscious. You have to be conscious and mindful about what you're saying and what you're doing in the presence and interacting with other people. Most of us are just unconscious. We're just living our life and talking how we talk. You want to relax because it takes effort and energy to be, trauma informed. It takes effort and energy for me to craft my words and say the right things, as opposed to get on here just cussing and all type of other stuff,
Yes.
or saying things that could traumatize you. And
Yes.
you asked me to talk about the fear encoded. Is that the fear is when we are developing, because a lot of these things go back to counseling and coaching, and know there are different, people have different opinions about counseling. Okay, I get that. I like to think of counseling as really just giving different strategies, giving a little bit more insight into something you might not know. There always is a stigma around getting coaching or counseling. We can leverage it at a different time, but
Yeah.
my point to bring that up is that the reason these things are an issue is because often they happen before you have the right language to describe what's going on. As an adult, self-actualized male, if something happens to me, I have several different tools at my disposal to deal with something. If you are saying something to me that I don't like, I have a voice. I can tell you to stop. If you say enough, I'm physical. I can remove myself from the situation or try to remove you. I can write it down. I can go tell my superiors at work. I could tell the police. I could tell a spouse. I have different techniques that I can do. Children don't have these techniques. Their brain has not developed to the degree where they can even manage sometimes what traumas are. They don't even have enough frame of reference because they haven't had enough experiences. They just respond with the emotion that that did not feel good. That not feeling good thing is a trauma. And what happens is now, as a child, you start recognizing anything that reminds you of that as a fear. You're going to avoid it. You're going to try to do something about it because it's scary, it's fearful. When you're young, your brain is still developing. So whatever memories you developed, and it's well documented that memories are much stronger if they are accompanied by intense emotion. Unfortunately, sometimes these intense emotions are fear or traumatic events or traumatic sayings. And it doesn't take much because you never know what a child might find intimidating or traumatic. That fear response coats the neurons and the memory pathway of the brain, and it's essentially forever. That child, that person grows up to think a certain way based on that memory that was coded. When I say coded, I mean like covered in the fear that initially stemmed from a trauma. It's often, we always blame the parents, at some
Yeah.
point you got to blame
Yeah.
the parents, but it could be stuff that just they experienced outside or with teachers or at school. Just when the world is big and scary, children don't have the resources to defend themselves. So a lot of these memories and experiences get coded in fear.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Imagine driving down the road, enjoying a beautiful day when suddenly a tree jumps out in front of your car. Crash! In an instant, your life is flipped upside down, both physically and psychologically. That was my reality. I'm Liz Blanding, a certified holistic wellness and trauma recovery coach. In a time when, according to the National Center for PTSD, the epidemic of trauma is on the rise, 70% of adults in the U.S. have experienced some type of traumatic event at least once in their lives. That's 223.4 million people who could benefit from support on their journey to recovery. To address this, I launched the Get Trauma Informed podcast in March 2024. Our podcast offers free information, resources, expert advice, and stories of those who have overcome trauma and shifted from surviving to thriving. The podcast has the capacity to reach hundreds of thousands of people. I believe that by partnering with the Get Trauma Informed podcast, we can provide critical support to many more people who need it. Trauma was not their fault, but recovery is their responsibility. And with your support, we can help them to achieve it. Thank you for considering the partnership opportunity. I look forward to the possibility of working together to make a significant impact on trauma recovery. Email us at info@oasiswellnessctrs.com or contact us at 616-320-0703. Now we will return to our Get Trauma Informed conversation. Yeah, and I'm very, very transparent with my audience, and I'm very transparent with my story in my book. And as we were talking a little bit ago, and I shared a little bit about, well, in my last book, The Pathway to Trauma Recovery, I talk about how I didn't understand how trauma and how fear developed in me as I was developing in my mother's womb because I was a product of domestic violence. And so that came up to the point that when we talk about how different people react to different circumstances, I basically from inception I was full of stress hormones and that experience. So it affects you even in that tender stage of becoming, right? Of even becoming a baby. So as I walk through life, through each traumatic experience, being that of and I understand now because on the other side in recovery, the one thing I like to let our audience know is that I say trauma is not your fault. That was not my fault as an infant. That was not my fault being born into domestic violence. It was
Right.
not my fault that, that I was drawn to or allowed because of my self-esteem issues. I allowed abusive men into my life. That was another bout of trauma. So each stage, it developed into complex PTSD. But what I do like to say is that and bring the hope, because on the other side of that, into when I went through trauma recovery, accepting that trauma wasn't my fault, but recovery was my responsibility, and I went into self-care. So now on the other side of that, when something comes up, I have the tools to actually see, is that reality or is that me still looking through the
Right.
kaleidoscope?
Through the lens. Yep.
Right. So as you go through trauma recovery, you put tools in your toolbox to help yourself. And you also go into that inner child, inner adult, inner adolescent. And now your inner adult, you have the tools to say to protect that inner child, and I talk about that in the book as well. But that's some of the tools that you have in recovery. So you don't have to stay, is what I'm saying, in that modem of fear, even though you've had those that your memory is coded in that fear. You don't have to stay there. You do have the ability to recover.
I love that. That's like a saying that I really love. I wish I knew who the quote was. It's like it says it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way.
Yes.
I love that because that puts the responsibility or the ownership on you to take ownership and try to make changes in your life. You said two things though that I kind of want to piggyback off of. Um, you talked about um, being encoded while still in the womb. Okay. And this is, I bring this up because this actually may be a whole different podcast for us, right? About
Yes.
the things that medicine has touched on and has seen, but has not been able to investigate, right?
Mm.
These are things like prenatal trauma or prenatal insults, the things that are coding, because you're alive at some point. Like we're not going to get into, at what point is a baby alive? You know, I,
Mm.
I can't tell you that information, but at some point before you're born, that baby's alive and having experiences inside the womb. And
Yes.
the things that you talked about, that you experienced, they show up. Those neurons are getting coded. And
Hmm.
so that baby comes here, like we see kids all the time. They have personality or stuff that's going on already before they get here. It's just they haven't developed anything to express it yet. They haven't developed language or motor skills to express it yet. That's
Right.
something medicine can't touch on
Yes.
or hasn't
Yes.
been able to touch on yet, but it's a real thing. Uh,
Absolutely.
that's a whole different discussion. The other thing you said about um, the fear encoded neurons and then your responsibility to kind of like get help. It's traumatic. We
Hmm.
just had a conversation a little while ago. We touched on
Yes.
something that was a trauma for me that I didn't like. I knew it, but I didn't even. But the response, you could see it on me.
Yes.
We tend to gravitate, unfortunately, those fear encrusted pathways in our brain,
Hmm.
whether we like them or not, whether
Yes.
they're traumatic or not.
Hmm.
We know them. We can be comfortable with them. So
Hmm.
when you said, you've gone through like kind of being around with traumatic people,
Hmm.
like we tend to gravitate to what we know. I have done the same thing. Like it's easy for me to stay in my bubble
Yes.
because even if I know this bubble is not right, it's easier for me to stay in this bubble because I know what to do. I know what to expect. I've managed a way of life in this. I know how to cope. I know how to deal with the responses that happen to me in my bubble. When you
Yes.
start talking about getting outside my bubble, that's a whole nother traumatic insult because inherently most humans have the fear of the unknown. So
Yes.
it's hard. It takes work. That's why the counseling, this is where I'm still an advocate for counseling and coaching.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because this is where you need some support. You need the safe space. You need somebody to guide you through the emotions that you're going to experience as you try to get out of the space that you know is no longer for you. Um,
Absolutely.
and that can be a
Absolutely.
trauma in itself. So you need someone with guidance. There are people that can do it alone. Some people do it alone, But it's much easier if you have somebody who's trauma informed, who knows what they're talking about, and who's going to create that safe environment for you to explore and build something new, like you're doing for me
Absolutely.
today.
Well, thank you. Absolutely. And I'm an advocate for coaching. I'm an advocate
Yes.
for therapy. I am such an advocate for that because you every great player, and I don't think that we see ourselves, especially when you've gone through trauma, as far as like your self-esteem, we don't see ourselves as a great player, but you are the playwright, you're the storyteller, you're the author of your life, right? And when we
Yes.
take that responsibility and say, you know what, in order for me to put on the best play, which is my life, or to put on, write the best book, I need coaching. I would have never, I started writing my first book in 1985. I have to say, right? I'm dating myself. I started writing it and it stayed on the shelf until I met a great coach that was a manuscript script developing coach and team. I never got those books out, up and out. And as I started doing that, I started walking through my trauma because I started writing about what I knew. Then I started writing about those things. And so without a great coach, I would not have been able to do that. And automations for my business, monetization for my business, all of these things, some things we do learn in college, you need a great foundation. But some of the things that you learn by meeting these coaches that are out here that specialize in what they do, they help you to get it up and out. And with trauma, I did a podcast on isolation. Isolation is kryptonite in trauma. So when you try to do it yourself, you're only looking at your own self for your own frame of reference. And you're still working with what I call myself, no offense to anybody else, but I say a broken brain because I was just like
Right.
Denzel Washington in the movie Flight. He was put into a broken plane and he turned that thing upside down and flew it. And that's what
Mhm.
we must do when
That's the
we've gone
code.
through trauma.
That's a
You
good
know?
analogy because the broken plane is the
Yes.
trauma. But turning it
Yes.
upside down is your response. Like,
It is. And you're going through life, and people see you as this made up person, and
why
you
are you
think you
flying the
got it
plane upside down?
together.
It's got to be something wrong with you. No, y'all
Exactly.
don't see what just happened. Like, you didn't see what just happened. I'm flying the plane upside down because if I don't, we all gonna die.
Exactly. I jumped in and I did what I had to do.
I
So
did what I had to do. Absolutely. That's an excellent
absolutely.
example. Yeah.
Yes. I love that. And I love that. And we talked a little bit, we talked about, man, I get so excited when I talk with you because you get it. You know what I'm saying? Like we talked about that before and you just get it. So you pull all of that out of me when we're talking about trauma informed. It's an amazing conversation with you.
Well, I tell you, it's always my pleasure to talk with you you are because you are transparent and you are able to talk about your experiences and the growth that you've had to go through and the things you've done in response and where you are. It is empowering to other people, including myself. Being transparent myself, I'll be honest, like as my experience as a physician, like I'll tell you something that was a little traumatic for me that I can share. Um, I went into medicine late. I did not start medical school until I was 30 years old. I was already a father of two, and I had a whole life before I got into medicine. Now, mind you, I wanted to be a physician since I was a child, but my life just took different turns along the way, and that happens sometimes, and it's okay. So by the time I started medicine, I was 30 years old and I was older than a lot of my peers. And so I had a different kind of set of life experiences, which this does help me in a lot of ways when dealing with patients because I can build rapport quickly because of all the things I've been through. I've been through a lot of trauma in my life. One of the things that I didn't realize was a trauma was how people perceived me after I became a physician. I'm talking parents, siblings, best friends, people who had known me for just almost 30 years or all my whole life. Almost overnight, the way they related to me was different. For a period of time in my life that my family and closest friends, they only could talk to me as a physician. Like it was always a question about, what do you think about this and my medicines or this and that? Or are you a doctor? Like the whole conversation that comes around you being a physician. I'm not, I guess I'm not the average doc because I grew up in Detroit. I grew up in Northwest Detroit. Like I'm not what you would consider if you knew me, probably the ideal picture of a physician from start to finish. I didn't get all A's all the time. I did different things in my life, but it was interesting to me how most of the people in my life could only relate to me as a physician after that. Like I'm thinking, it was traumatic. I didn't think about it at the time till later. It was like, and you've been knowing me all my whole life, and we had so much things, so many different experiences together and trips and all type of stuff. But now only thing you can talk to me about is being a physician. Like I felt isolated. You talked about that isolation being kryptonite. I felt isolated. Isolation is kryptonite for anybody, whether you've been traumatized or not. But it was like, man, people put you on a pedestal, or people interact with you differently. It's like, man, you've known me all my life, you know, and now all I can get is medical conversation. That's like, it doesn't allow me to have a release anywhere, and so then I'm stuck in this box that people try to put you in. I will say that I had two people. My wife kind of kept me grounded because it didn't really change. She didn't change a lot in regards to me being a physician, the way she related to me, which was good, which is important. My children didn't either because they still see me as dad. Well, my son in residency nicknamed me Papa Doc, so he kind of made some adjustments.
Cute.
But my one of my best friends, Damon Riley, shout out Damon. The extent of his change for me was, he's like, "You a doctor? Wow, do they know they let you in?" Okay. And then that was the end of it. Like that was the only, like, he acknowledges it, and much he bigged me up, congratulations, all that. But how he interacted with me never changed. And to this day, I'm so grateful because you can feel the difference. This day, we still have the same. I've been friends with Damon for going on, it's been 30 years, almost 30 years now. And, not for 1 minute did it change my interactions. And I didn't realize how empowering and how protective and how safe that was for me until I really started thinking about my interactions with other people. Even my mother, I love my mother, and she's my mom, so she your baby is a doctor, like, that's a whole thing. But even for a while, it was like, so the newness, until the newness wore off of people, that's all they could talk about. So,
right.
But when you're going through it, like, and that's a good form of trauma for me, I guess I could say. But when you're in it, other people just see what they see. They don't see what you're going through. They're unconscious of what you're going through, and they may say things or behave in a way towards you that triggers something in you. So that's why, I'm glad you're able to be transparent, because it helps me to be able to say certain things, and it also helps me realize stuff that I've witnessed. Like, oh man, that was like, I call myself being mindful when I deal with people, but sometimes you're like, wow, I didn't realize I said that. I'm glad somebody else has a perspective for me outside of myself.
Yes. I think that's very relatable, because the same thing when I became a published author and then hit best-selling author, and then
anytime you're successful,
all of those things, people don't understand. It's a lot of pressure because they'll put you on a pedestal that you don't want to be.
Right.
You don't want to be on that pedestal. You want to be who you are to them, and you appreciate the respect, you appreciate the love, but you are still yourself, and you are sometimes expected not to be human. Right. And we're all human,
Absolutely.
And I think that's the big thing. And that's why I shout. This is like my polarizing message, to become trauma aware. And something that you just said, conscious. And the thing of becoming trauma aware is so that we can perform better, so that we can, if you're not trauma informed and you're working with other people, and then you have people that have suffered from trauma, or if you're not even aware of your own trauma, it's trauma working against trauma. So we're not getting the true picture, or we're not getting the best out of what that collaboration, what that partnership, you're not getting the best of that until we actually become aware of the trauma that other people have gone through, the other people have faced, what happened to them when they went through that trauma. And I love the fact that you talked about that just really resonated with me about the memory, and why for so long my life journey was fear. I was always on that stress response of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn constantly. And I did not understand what that was until I became trauma informed, trauma aware, and then certified in these trauma areas. I didn't understand what that was. And it helped me to now go into recovery. So when things happen, and I like to stress upon this part too, this is something that's happened to us, right? And it's something that we can't change. It's just like when a car gets hit, that car, it's always that issue or that challenge is there. But when we know it's there and we go into recovery, we can help ourselves not to relapse by staying into self-care, by making sure. I know for me, I cannot let myself become overwhelmed. When I do, things start to unwire for me, unravel for me.
Right.
So now that I know that I have to get up in the morning stretching. I have to get up in the morning. I have to make sure I stay hydrated. These are things that we can do in our self-care, putting together our self-care plan, but you were talking about that as well, but putting together our self-care plan so that we know and that we don't feel guilty putting ourselves first. Because when we do that, we can now provide the best of ourselves to other people, and we actually function and operate better when we are taking care of ourselves in our self-care plan.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Today's episode is sponsored by Oasis Wellness Centers, home of Soothing Salve, an organic pain relief salve infused with over 30 natural herbs. It fights inflammation, provides pain relief, relieves stiffness, relieves dry and itchy skin, and it also improves circulation. Oasis Wellness Center's mission is dedicated to relieving pain, promoting relaxation, and restoring mobility. In order to grab your jar today, contact us at www.oasiswellnessctrs.com. Now we return to our Get Trauma Informed conversation.
This is why we have great conversations, because there's so much that you just said that we could kind of unpack. You said a couple things there. Like knowing, like when if you said something like knowing what they've been through, right? As being informed, being conscious of what somebody's been through. You also, like, that's true. You do have to know that, but you also have to know how they cope, how they compensate for what they went through. Because me and you both could be in the same traumatic situation. My traumatic response and how I self-soothe and how I go to get back to equilibrium may be a totally different method than you have. Yeah. And so I don't want to pick on counselors, because I've had counseling, personal and professional, and I've done counseling. And so I've had to counsel people. So I love counselors. I'm gonna pick on them for a little while. Every personality is different. So, when you're dealing with people's minds and people's thoughts and trying to improve their behavior or help them with their behavior patterns, you have to be very attentive and conscious to the person you're dealing with. And sometimes counselors, like every other human, they're not always as mindful of what's going on. So you may have two different individuals in front of you who've gone through the same kind of trauma, but they have diverging or different strategies to manage themselves. One person may need a counselor to be a parental type figure and be very direct and give you the steps. Do A, then B, then C, and then let's reevaluate. That may be what gives security and safety to that one person. If you take the same counselor and use the same dynamic to another person, that may shut them down and give them a trauma response, because who are you to be demanding me? I ain't had a parent in my life, or whatever the issues are. You can't tell me what to do. This is what I need to do. So as the person who is in authority, or the person who is the power differential, or the person who's trying to facilitate the help, is a better way to say it. The person who's trying to facilitate the help, you have to be mindful. You have to make the adjustments. You have to change your approach so that you can reach that person. So I can't have a cookie cutter method for every patient that I see. When I walk in a room, I could be having a patient who's going through the same thing my last patient was going through, but they have a different response to medicine. They see me, I'm a Black male, I'm a fairly big guy, and they've had, relationship issues. I have to be mindful of that. It may be, I might not even know about it before I walk in the room, but that's why I go in the room. I sit on a chair lower than where they are. I speak with a soft voice. I ask them, are they ready? I knock on the door and ask them if they're okay for me to come in. I tell them I'm going to examine them. I ask them, is it okay if I do certain things? My goal as someone who is trauma informed and who has compassionate care is to give the person I'm talking to, my patient, the person I'm trying to help, as much power as possible. I'm the CEO of Empowerment Medical Services. That's my company I work medicine out of. And I believe in the empowerment because the more empowered you are, the better you are able to take care of yourself, the better you are to deal with your stressors, the better you are able to come into recovery from your traumas. My job is to give you what you need. And that doesn't look the same for everybody. Some people need a very strict, like, this is what you do, A, B, and C. Some people need the freedom to do it on their own. Some people need a counselor. Some people need a different type of method. That's why you have so many different methods in counseling. You got CBT, you got Imago, you got talk therapy, you got just Gestalt. You got so many different methods because we're so many different types of humans and we respond to different things. And as a physician, I've made it my point to be able to try to meet you where you are, which means I have to be prepared. I have to be dealing with my own stuff. And sometimes it means I have to compartmentalize what I feel. So I've walked into rooms where most recently, I can tell you, I had a patient who was having a bunch of chest pain. And this is not the first time this has happened to me. I walked in, he had all type of swastikas and SS marks on his legs, and he wasn't a skinhead, but he was older, and that was what it was. I walked in the door, we're putting EKG leads on him, and he's sweating, and he's in pain. He looks at me, and I can see it flash through his mind. I don't know how to deal with this because this is my belief pattern, because it's evident by all the tattoos, but you're coming in to help me. I know you're the doctor. And so I just put him right at ease. How you doing? Like, I don't even notice that stuff. Like, I don't even care. Like, I have no desire to bring my personal understanding of what you go through or that into what I'm doing for you. My job is to help you. If that's your belief, then we're going to structure a plan in line with what you believe. I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to agree with it, but I do have to validate what you're feeling and what you're saying, or else I'm not going to be able to reach you. And then in my profession, since I work primarily in emergency, if I can't reach you, it's a chance you could die, because if you don't like me, or if I don't build a rapport with you and you leave, or you don't follow the instruction or follow what we need to do, then you could die. And that's not what I'm here for.
And you just demonstrated for us what trauma-informed means, right? You just demonstrated that so well. I want to go back to something that you talked about when you talked about, and I am an advocate for coaching, for therapy, for having, I've been able to accomplish the things that I've been able to accomplish because I had the right coaches around me. For me, therapy didn't work, but only because I did not pair with a therapist that understood me, basically, that was trauma informed. Yeah. Had I met a trauma informed therapist, we don't know what would have occurred. Right. But when I got into coaching and they were able to draw me into what our goals were, and I was empowered. I was one of those people that you said, like I said, from through my childhood, because of the violence and because of the things that I experienced, my whole coding was fear. So my trauma response to every single thing was fear. So, and also because, I love my parents, but I did come from a dysfunctional family. So I did not have much trust. And you brought that out to me today. So we had a breakthrough moment today, you all, right here live, because you just gave me the reason why I needed to be in control. Like, I needed to have either a partnership with my doctors, and why the other type of care, the dictator type of care, did not work for me. You gave me that. I just had a little interruption here. That's okay. But we're going to keep working because we work through challenges.
Well, what I'll say is that, that my introduction to this, I was fresh out of residency. And I had been working in the ER probably for about a year or so, when the reality dawned on me. And this is how I started kind of spending more time with counselors, getting counseling myself and learning about counseling. I actually feel like I should get a counseling degree at this point, is that I figured out that 75 to 80% of the people I saw in the ER, regardless of why they were there, I'm talking heart attacks, I'm talking strokes, I'm talking car accidents, I'm talking shooting, stabbings, babies being born in my ER, whatever they came in for, 80% of them showed up in my ER in front of me because of some kind of trauma response, either the trauma they went through or what they do to cope with it. Meaning they had some kind of trauma in childhood, so or young adulthood, and so now they don't take any medicine. They've been diagnosed with high blood pressure for 30 years and have not been taking blood pressure medicine because the doctor they went to see the first time, they didn't fit with them for whatever reason. They didn't go seek another doctor. They didn't try to get somebody else to help them with it. They just stopped taking medicine. I feel just fine. I don't need it. And so they show up in my ER at 55 years old and they have a stroke because they haven't been, and they knew they were supposed to be on blood pressure medicine. Family knew they were supposed to be on blood pressure medicine, but because they didn't trust healthcare providers, they weren't on the medicine. And so that took me back. Like, how do we fix some of these things? And it really is having a trauma-informed medicine complement that people are not, and then also medical industry having some transparency. That's maybe another episode about the different things that have gone wrong in healthcare, because the reality is medicine is not always accurate. They're still learning some different things, and sometimes it's just been outright offensive, like done things to different people. Like I remember the Tuskegee experiments are in my brain all the time. Being a Black male, denying people from penicillin. Once you got the data, it works, and you still run these studies. So these things have happened. Like there's no, like you said, it's a trauma. It's happened. It's not a matter of did it happen or not, or how you feel about it. It happened. And so now we have to do things like to deal with the coping mechanism. This happened. Now certain different cohorts of people don't trust the medical industry. So now you have to do something to try to make that right. And for me, being somebody who's a healer first, a physician second, I have to manage what I know about traditional medicine versus what I know about the human spirit, versus what I know about, spirituality, versus what I know about natural health and naturopathy, versus what I know about people just taking an accountability for their own lives. So for me, one of my things was I wanted to be a whole physician. I wanted to be like a full physician. That's why I did the two specialties. Because I feel like a doctor should be able to do, the clinic, the emergent, the ER stuff. I'm not a surgeon. I'm not going in surgery. I do minor stuff like INDs, but I'm not taking you to the surgery operating room. I got colleagues that can do that. But also a doctor needs to be able to do research and self-learn, and they need to self-correct and change behavior to do what's right for the person they're trying to care for, their patient. And that's kind of my strategy. And that's why I started getting a little bit more, like if you talk to me and you talk to another physician who's in the ER, we might not have the same point of view on certain stuff, even though we treat the patients with a similar line of treatment.
Yes.
So.
Well, just so you know, you are like a shining light through darkness when it comes to, a lot of people are traumatized in the area of, they will pull back, like you said. And I know tons of people that have pulled back from traditional medicine because of bad experiences and such. So you're a beacon of light for us that said, I do take my health very seriously. And so I think your voice will really resonate with a lot of people out there to say, wow, there is hope in what I'm going through, what I'm challenged with. So I think with that, we definitely are going to have you back, because I could talk to you for days and days.
I would love to,
y'all.
yes. I would love to. And I would love to come back. I'd like to make this some kind of standing arrangement or something. We have different topics we can talk about.
Absolutely.
But I would like to say, it's always been, as far back as I can remember, it's been my calling to be a physician, to be a healer. And you said there's light in my voice. There are other doctors out there like me. I'm not the only one. There are people doing similar things and who are really good in the medical profession, But I will say, if you hear any light or anything that resonates with you coming out of my voice, that's the God in me. One of the things that I had to do spiritually to be able to follow my path in the medicine from where I was, and maybe one day I'll give my whole story. But I had to check my ego. I was 30 years old, I had kids, and I kind of messed up in a lot of ways. And so to have the shot to get in, I had to check my ego. I totally let go of all ego as I went into medicine. It's not about me. I understand that I'm a highly intelligent, highly motivated, highly capable individual, always have been since I was a kid. I have blessings that other people don't have. I have gifts that I've developed over time. I know my ego. I know where I'm at. I got a healthy ego. But when it comes to helping people, none of that, that's completely gone from me when someone's sitting in front of me asking for help. I'm taking
Yes.
everything I have that's in me to empower you. Or if that means I'm giving you medicines or doing CP, whatever I'm doing, whatever it is. And I pray a little prayer every time I go into work and every patient because I know where my source is. And so
Yes.
I know where that calling came from. I know where my purpose is. I know who I am, and I walk in, and I'm blessed to walk in my purpose. I know what it feels like. Everybody doesn't get
Yes.
blessed to do that. So I
Absolutely.
know it has nothing to do with my ego or me at all. Um,
Absolutely.
so I know
Yes.
God is shining that light.
That's so incredible because that is part of my story when I talk about,
Yeah.
I didn't understand for years why a life of pain, right? And then and again, I'm transparent in it. Why a life of pain? Then I understood as God has given me a voice in the trauma informed community and how many people the message is resonating with, and
Yes.
then being able to walk in my recovery. I know that I would have never been able to do any of this without my faith and without God showing me that my pain turned into purpose and it developed who I am today. And your pain is never just for you. It's for others, for you to help other people and to guide them into letting them know that there is hope and that there is a better life and that their life journey and life story can also be, a beacon of light to somebody else. So you definitely you're no longer a guest, Dr. Lance. You are family here on the Get Trauma
Thank
Informed
you.
podcast.
Thank
You are
you.
my brother, and you are definitely welcome here anytime to come and to, share what you shared with us today. And I know I'm going to get back feedback that we absolutely did not disappoint with this episode of the Get Trauma Informed podcast. So much so, it's going up tomorrow. I didn't leapfrogged you over everything in the
Okay.
schedule. This one is going up tomorrow. And so I so appreciate you. Is there anything that you would like to leave our audience with today as we wrap up?
Um, Yeah, I got one. I'll leave you with this. I'll leave you with this is the foundational I have principles by which I practice medicine. And this is the foundational principle that I practice medicine by. But given the topic today, the trauma informed, I think it's valuable for everybody because this is kind of a way that you can to deal with. You can implement trauma informed language and behaviors in your own life. So my foundational principle is no one cares what you know until they know that you care. That's Teddy Roosevelt. And it is the foundational principle of medicine for me. And people who meet me, if I'm taking care of them, people who meet me will know that I care just because of how I present myself. Then I can tell them what I know. Then I can try to help them. And I think far as trauma informed goes or compassionate care or whatever language, because sometimes even the language we use to describe things can send people one direction or another. Our objective is to show people that we care so that we can help them. If you love someone, you try to help them. And sometimes help looks like not helping them. Sometimes help looks like keeping distance, just keeping a space for like maintaining a space. Like I'm leaving. How does the language go? I'm leaving space for you. So if that's all you need, just know that I'm a safe space and I'm gonna hold it for you. When you need to talk or if you need something, I'm available. It doesn't always mean me sending out to you. It just means I'm holding a space for you because I care.
That is absolutely incredible. And again, thank you so very much. We look forward to your next conversation with you. And as
All right.
always, you all, we'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now. It's time to buckle up. No more suffering in silence. Our Power Pack journey to recovery and realignment starts now. Remember, you are collateral damage on someone else's warpath. Trauma is not your fault. Recovery, however, is your responsibility. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast.